We were never a rich family, because even before I was born, Dad lost all his money in the casino. When Mom found out about this and realized that a child would be raised in poverty, her sick heart could not stand it. She fell seriously ill. Despite this, Mom always tried to give me the best. While Dad was looking for a part-time job, she was there. So I decided I couldn't bear to see her suffer. I would earn a lot of money and help my parents get out of poverty. The first thing I needed was to pay our debts. As soon as I finished school, I decided to go to the factory. I paid well, and no education was required. But when I went to the boss and explained that I wanted to work for him, he suddenly laughed in my face and said, they did not need such frail, effeminate boys. It was like I was slapped in the face. I clenched my fist in frustration. Yes, I was not a muscular, handsome guy, but why insult me? Disappointed, I went home. My parents were whispering in the kitchen. Dad was actively convincing Mom of something. I was wary, and then I heard a passage. Finally, we will get rich. I immediately remembered how Mom told me that, with the same words, Dad took everything out of the house, from the TV to the dishes. Because of his addiction, we became beggars. I rarely got new clothes, and I went to school in rags. Therefore, my classmates did not miss the opportunity to offend me, calling me a street rat. I always wanted to get out of poverty. After all, only then we will finally be happy. I sighed. Everything was in my hands. All night I studied vacancies, and in the morning I went to get a job as a waiter. Although the salary was low, I was hoping for a good tip. But even here, the boss asked skeptically if I had any experience. My palms were sweating as I quietly replied that I had never worked before. This was the end. I want to be hired. But the boss chuckled. So be it. You'll go on probation. I broke into a smile. Got it. Finally, we would break out of poverty. I wanted to jump for joy and immediately ran home to tell Mom everything. We would be happy. But suddenly, my dad stopped me on the threshold, and he smiled enigmatically. He had a present for me. Present? Dad immediately handed me a large box. I hesitantly opened it and... What? Was this a joke? There was a woman's wig inside. Dad, are you completely out of your mind? There's no money and you're wasting it on nothing. I got angry and went to my room. I spent the next week at the cafe doing my best, staying late, trying to please the guests as much as possible. So I was constantly left with big tips. I was so happy about it. I hid everything I earned in the locker room, and soon a good amount of money accumulated there, enough to pay off the debts. After work, I returned home inspired and again saw Dad with burning eyes convincing Mom. This will definitely work. We'll finally have the money. I clenched my fists. Was he talking about the casino again? I immediately went up to them and shouted that we did not need any of his super earning schemes. I earned my money in an honest way, and now we had money. And just in time, in a week the payment period expired. We could lose our house. But Dad just chuckled in disbelief. Well, where's your honest money? I don't see them. I gritted my teeth. You would see tomorrow. In the morning, I went straight to work and to the locker room. But as soon as I got to the locker, my heart sank. The lock was open. It was impossible. I remember that I locked the locker. With trembling hands, I opened the door. There was no stash. I immediately rummaged through all the things, but in vain. Despair washed over me. Someone stole everything. This wasn't supposed to go unpunished. I immediately went to the boss's office, but as soon as I told him, he snorted that it was my own fault. I was beginning to get a bit anxious. It was my money. The thief had to be found. But the boss just said that I was acting like a girl, and I looked the same. I couldn't stand it anymore. How dare he say that? I shouted in anger that he was an idiot who didn't care about his employees. But he didn't seem to care about me at all. You're fired, the boss gritted out. And only this phrase brought me back to reality. I frantically tried to justify myself, but the boss was adamant. This was the end. I lost my job and my money. What should I tell my parents? When I entered, Dad asked where the money was, and I just looked away in confusion. He understood everything and smiled triumphantly. Dad knew that there were no options other than his way of earning money. He added mockingly, "Son, go try on the dress. Soon you'll be wearing only them." What was he talking about? He was mocking me. I clenched my fists, but for some reason, Mom was hesitating. God, how much could she trust Dad? After all, he only promised to earn money and then he lost everything. I didn't say anything and went back to my room, slamming the door behind me. Couldn't sleep all night because of my nagging thoughts. Where can I get the money now? How could I pay for our debts? It seemed that all was lost and I was forever mired in poverty. I fell asleep only in the morning. Dad woke me up and told me that Mom needed to go to the hospital urgently to get medicine. And of course he did not have time because he was going to the next part-time job. I quickly packed up and went outside. Mom was already waiting for me at the bus stop, and together we boarded the bus. We drove longer than the usual, which seemed strange to me, and Mom was sitting there with a pained expression on her face. I gently took her hand and asked if everything was alright. Mom shuddered and looked at me rather sadly. She started to say something, but then just nodded and turned back to the window. When we arrived at the clinic, I was confused. It was modern, large, and not at all like an ordinary hospital. It was kind of weird. We went inside. It was a long drive, and I had to go to the bathroom. I asked Mom to wait for me in the hallway, and then I turned into the restroom. A strange feeling never left me for a second. I went to the sink to wash my face when someone called out to me. He was a young guy, but very feminine. His voice was high, his waist was narrow, and his features were more like a girl's. The guy asked, "Oh, were you a girl too?" The question confused me. What did he mean? Then the guy impatiently explained, "Well, are you here for a sex change operation? Or it's already done?" What kind of sex change? I didn't understand anything. We weren't the usual. Wait. Then images flashed before my eyes. How Dad gave me a wig and hinted at dresses. How he persuaded Mom to do something. It meant I looked in horror at a guy who looked very feminine, and he had breasts. Yes, he was a girl. This was not a hospital, but a plastic surgery clinic. Did my parents want to change my sex? I ran into the corridor. No, I didn't agree to the operation. I had almost reached the exit when Dad appeared at the entrance and, seeing me, shouted, "Catch him!" Oh no, one of the orderlies blocked my path, and the other wrung my hands. I didn't even have the time to react, and they were already dragging me down the corridor. I tried to pull away, but just before I entered an office, I met my mom's eyes. She was almost crying, but she wasn't going to save me. What was going on? I started to struggle, but the orderlies were twice my size. They dragged me into the operating room and put me on the table. "I don't want to be a girl, wait!" I was shouting, but the doctor was already administering anesthesia. I felt my eyelids grow weak, and I struggled less every second. That's how I ended up in this operating room. I gave up and was sure that I would wake up as a girl. But at that moment, Mom ran into the operating room. With tears in her eyes, she screamed to stop the operation. Then suddenly she clutched at her heart and fell into the floor. My stomach twisted with terror. "Mom, no!" I wanted so much to help her, but the anesthesia was already taking effect. Without realizing it, I blacked out. I came to myself in the ward and vaguely remembered what had happened. "Oh my God, Mom!" I immediately jumped, looking for her with my eyes. Was she alright? And then someone grabbed my arm. I whirled around. It was Mom. She was sitting next to me and her eyes were full of tears. Dad was there too, and he seemed a little bit down. I breathed a sigh of relief. "Mommy, I'm so glad you're alright." In response, he gently stroked my hair. "Son, I'm sorry," Mom sobbed. "Didn't mean to do this to you." And then I suddenly remembered everything. Relief was replaced by resentment. Why did they want to change my sex? Dad sighed. He'd met a man in a bar a few weeks ago. He said that he was looking for a beautiful girl, and if Dad brought him one, he would give the family a large sum of money. What kind of nonsense was this? What did that have to do with me? Then Dad hesitated. I was very feminine and beautiful. The only obstacle was my sex, which was just worth changing. He had a hard time getting Mom to do it. When she heard my screams, she knew she'd made a mistake. It was good that the operation was stopped. After all, the man turned out to be a fraud, and he was not going to give any money. With such a scheme, he simply found beautiful girls. I was in shock. So Dad wanted to make me a girl for the money? I couldn't believe it, but I couldn't be angry at my mom's tears. She had done so much for me. I sighed and smiled reassuringly. The main thing was that the parents realized their mistake. After we were discharged from the hospital, we went to the police station and told them in detail about this fraudster. He said that he had found a girl and would bring her to him. And now is the girl, wearing a wig and a new dress. However, the fraudster did not have the time to check out my beauty. Almost immediately, he got busted. And we, having received a substantial reward for the assistance of the police, immediately paid off our debts and paid for Mom's treatment. I always thought that we would only be happy with money. But now I realized that happiness is a family. People who will always be there, and not the wealth at all. Did you like this video? then subscribe and like it. Support the channel, folks. Thank you so much.